It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Happy Friday, everybody. On today's show, we'll talk about the Odyssey as part of our occasional series that we call Context and a Movie. We'll match a film critic with a classics professor to talk about Homer's original, Christopher Nolan's blockbuster adaptation, and a little bit about the right-wing backlash the movie is getting. Did you hear all that Elon Musk stuff and some other things? We'll also have New York City's Small Business Services Commissioner to take your questions and complaints about red tape. Mayor Mamdani says they're attacking it in a new way. We'll invite you to put your red tape questions to his commissioner for that. And we'll look at the complicated relationship between the rising DSA and some longtime Black and Latino leaders in the city who are concerned about a new kind of marginalization. But first, we're at the intersection of the New Jersey Motor Vehicles Department and the national politics of voter registration. On Tuesday, you've probably heard this, Governor Mikie Sherrill announced that a software issue at DMV accidentally registered about 6,000 non-citizens to vote. Fewer than 10% of them, or around 400, actually did. She says there's no evidence of this glitch affecting the outcome of any election in the state. But the revelation comes just as President Trump and the Republican Party generally are looking for new ways to make voter registration and actually casting ballots harder for the midterms. They say it's in the name of preventing voter fraud, despite the lack of evidence of anything major like that, and, of course, the history of Trump's false claims about his loss to Joe Biden in 2020. But something did happen in New Jersey. State Republicans now say it's bigger than what the Democratic governor revealed, and they want to roll back the state's so-called motor voter law that automatically registered citizens, supposed to be just citizens, through their contact with the DMV, and the law that allows non-citizen immigrants to get driver's licenses. With us now, WNYC and Gothamist, New Jersey reporter Mike Hayes, and Liza Weisberg, a supervising attorney at the ACLU of New Jersey, where she focuses on democracy and voting rights. Hi, Mike. And by the way, is it Lisa or Liza?
It's Liza. You got it right. Hi, Brian.
Liza.
Thank you so much.
And thanks for
Brian.
coming on.
Thanks for having
Welcome
me.
to WNYC. Hey, Mike. Liza, I want to start with a New Jersey Globe article you were quoted in back in April about the Trump administration suing New Jersey to turn over all its voter registration data. As an ACLU lawyer, you were obviously opposed to that. So is the state. But give us the context. What kind of data did the Trump administration ask for, and what did Governor Sherrill and the state do?
Yeah, so the Department of Justice has asked New Jersey and a number of states all across the country to turn over its unredacted voter files. So New Jersey is perfectly willing to share its voter file with the federal government, and the government has access to it. It just insists on protecting the privacy of its voters and complying with federal and state privacy laws by redacting certain highly sensitive personal identifying information like driver's licenses and partial social security numbers that are in those voter rolls. And so that's the aspect that the Department of Justice has taken issue with. And now every single court to hear these types of cases all around the country has rejected the DOJ's demand for these unredacted voter files. So far, that's 16 courts, 16 federal district courts, and one federal circuit court.
Unredacted means it would include voters' names, addresses, dates of birth, in some cases partial driver's licenses or social security numbers, according to that article. But what's the risk to those people that you would argue exists? How could the federal government hypothetically use that personal information to harm innocent people?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of evidence in the public record that what the federal government is trying to do with that data is to use really unreliable tools and data matching and aggregation techniques to pour over states' voter files to try to sort of further their immigration enforcement policy objectives, right? They want to share these lists with agencies like DHS to go after voters that they have villainized, and we know that when these kinds of programs are used, there are tons of false positives. And so there's a real risk that voters would be disenfranchised through this type of process. And so we represent voters in this case. We're interveners in the case. We represent voters who are afraid that if the government gets their hands on their personal identifying information, they will be wrongly accused of improperly voting or registering to vote, even though they are eligible, and that the federal government will sort of take retaliatory action against them, or otherwise invade their privacy and voting rights.
So, Mike Hayes, to the present, Governor Sherrill announces 6,000 non-citizens were registered to vote because of the software error at DMV, she says, and around 400 of those folks did actually vote in elections, which non-citizens aren't allowed to do. Did the state discover this because of pressure from Washington to inspect the voter rolls for non-citizens voting, like the things we were just discussing with Liza?
Yeah, it appears that way, Brian. But interesting here, Governor Sherrill says she found out on June 15th, so 9 days ago, about this. But she also said in that press conference on Tuesday that this glitch in the software that she discussed was fixed way back in June 2024. So we don't know yet why it took so long for Sherrill to know about this. She's come down really hard on former Governor Phil Murphy's administration for letting this happen on his watch. It'll be interesting to see if politically she can contain that damage here and get the public to buy into that message. Republicans in New Jersey are not going to make it easy for her. And Brian, this comes as Governor Sherrill is riding pretty high in the state. Some polls had her approval ratings near 60% this spring. She's been able to make things happen with her energy agenda. Her first budget negotiation went pretty smoothly. But she's going to have to deal with this fast. And she said the investigation is moving very quickly yesterday. But the midterms are coming up, and what's coming up even sooner is vote-by-mail ballots are going to be sent out in less than 2 months. So I suspect there'll be pressure to get this, independent investigation done and show some fixes have been put in place before then.
And the timing of this is very interesting in another way, too, because just last week, of course, Trump gave that primetime speech alleging vulnerabilities in our election system that he wants to crack down on. We're going to play a short clip from the speech that addresses, though it reportedly overstates, the exact kind of thing that has now been revealed in New Jersey.
To reveal just how vulnerable our elections continue to be, we are releasing the results of a stunning investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. According to the DHS review, state voter rolls and public records, they identified approximately 278,000 non-citizens who are registered to vote in federal elections. Since Democrat states refuse to share their voter files, the real number is actually much higher than that. Yet, even this limited analysis found more than 250,000 foreigners illegally registered to vote.
Trump last Thursday. I'll mention that a CNN analysis says the data matching program Trump cited is known to present an inflated number of suspected non-citizens, in part because naturalized citizens are often flagged wrongly as non-citizens. But nevertheless, the category is non-citizens being registered to vote. And then just 5 days later, Governor Sherrill reveals that some of that happened in her state. Mike, do you know if the timing was a coincidence?
I don't believe in coincidences here, Brian. I mean, it can't possibly be a coincidence. But
so, like, she wanted to get ahead of it so that no Trump official could jump out and say, aha, look what happened in New Jersey. It's exactly what the president said in a speech that everybody dismissed, and they're covering it up. That kind of thing. She wanted to get ahead of it.
Yeah, everything she's said has suggested that she wants to get ahead of this, coming out with some real specifics on the independent investigation, hiring this law firm to do the independent investigation, sort of thing. But also, she hasn't shied away, her administration hasn't shied away from doing the math here and saying things to me like, look, 400 votes, 6,600 registrations is nowhere near equates to the numbers that Trump is putting out there. I think the math he released during that speech had something like 35,000 of those voters were from New Jersey. So yeah, she's staying on the offensive here, Brian. Going back to what she's been saying this week about Trump, she was defiant yesterday about handing this information, this voter roll information over to the DOJ. It seems like it's really a non-starter for her. She even went as far to say Trump has done more to damage election integrity than anyone in her lifetime, including Vladimir Putin. So yeah, Cheryl's got her boxing gloves on when it comes to Trump, and yeah, there's really no surprise here.
So, Liza, do you want to follow up on that? Because Trump and other Republicans are saying, aha, this proves that we need states to share voter data with the federal government to prevent more non-citizens from voting, the exact thing Washington asked for in the lawsuit against the state, this unredacted voter registration information. Considering this revelation, do they have more of a point?
No, I think that folks are really insistent on trying to shoehorn this event into a narrative that's been, thoroughly debunked about voter fraud, where it really doesn't fit. And this revelation really reinforces what voting rights advocates have long understood and communicated, which is that when there are errors or irregularities like this in the voter rolls, first of all, they're largely overwhelmingly due to things like what we saw here, software glitches, administrative errors, rather than something like affirmative plans or the fault of voters. Second, they occur in really small, isolated numbers, right? There's the number of mistakenly registered voters here is an infinitesimally small percentage of all registrants in New Jersey, and the number of mistaken votes cast is even smaller. And then third, we see here a good example that the state is perfectly well positioned to identify and fix these problems on their own without the help of the federal government. And then finally, the state, and I commend Governor Sherrill for being really clear on this, can fix these problems without making it harder to vote or doubling down on these debunked voter fraud myths, which have come at a huge cost to eligible U.S. citizen voters. Right, when the reaction to these kinds of events is to push policies that make voting harder, like the Trump administration wants to do, that harms the eligible U.S. citizen voters that the Trump administration says they are trying to protect. Right, it makes voting more complicated and cumbersome, drives turnout down. It deters and dissuades eligible voters from participating in the political process. And these burdens, we know from decades of research, are felt disproportionately in communities of color, among younger voters, among elderly voters, voters with disabilities, voters with limited English proficiency, and other groups that have been historically excluded or disenfranchised.
So, listeners, are you a non-citizen in New Jersey who got accidentally registered to vote? Did you actually vote, maybe thinking you were eligible because they registered you? Or any questions or comments for WNYC and Gothamist New Jersey reporter Mike Hayes, or Liza Weisberg, supervising attorney at the ACLU of New Jersey, where she focuses on democracy and voting rights. 212-433 WNYC, call or text 212-433-96 9-2. And Mike, at the state level, New Jersey Republicans are saying the data that Sherrill released was only for the years 2023 and 2024. And the problem is more widespread if you look at more years. So why was the release data only for those 2 years? And what are the Republicans alleging, and have they released any evidence?
Yeah, so just to set the scene here, Brian, back in 2018, Governor Murphy signed a law that brought on automatic voter registration. So this has been going on since at least then. And I reported yesterday that the Republican...
When you say this is going on, you don't... has been going on since at least then. You don't know, I think we don't know, that there have been other computer errors accidentally registering non-citizens before 2023, or do we?
No, sorry to be clear. When I say that, I mean automatic voter registration has been going on since 2018. So just to set the time period we're dealing with here. So I reported yesterday that Republicans in the state claim they have found additional evidence. Now, they haven't released that much. I was on a press conference yesterday run by the chairwoman of the NJGOP, Christine Hanlon, and she gave out 8 examples of non-citizen voters that they found outside this time period. She said they were able to cull that information from public records requests. And interestingly, those examples she provided yesterday, Brian, those were people who self-reported that they had mistakenly been registered to vote. They were non-citizens. They wanted to be taken off the voter rolls. Of those 8, only 2 actually voted in elections. So very minimal examples being put out by Republicans at this point. But they think that that alone makes the point that, hey, this was happening outside of this time period. And the Sherrill administration, they do have a lot of questions to answer here about, why are we only learning about this time period right now, and what are they going to be looking at? I've asked them questions like, was it a statewide thing, these 6,600 that you've released, disclosed so far? Or was it concentrated in a specific part of the state? Was the voting concentrated in a specific part of the state? There is a lot we don't know at this period. And to be fair, I understand the limitations of what they're saying at this point. You don't want to have to go back and correct the record later if they are truly doing a robust, if there is a robust independent investigation going on here. So yeah, but Republicans in the state are all over this, Brian. They're seizing on this. I also reported yesterday that they're preparing to introduce new legislation, which would not only call for getting rid of automatic voter registration at the DMV, but also introduce a voter ID law, as well as call for independent audits. Now, just to be clear, that second point there, voter ID law, that should be considered a poison pill here. Democrats have privately been telling me like that is a complete non-starter. They have no interest in passing a voter ID law, and they have a super majority on the on the legislature right now. There's a better chance of the Yankees trading Aaron Judge to the Red Sox at the trade deadline than New Jersey passing a voter ID law. So, yes, that sort of thing is going on with Republicans right now, but it's not that serious of a suggestion, to be perfectly frank.
If Judge is going to be injured for the rest of his career, it might be a good trade. But Dan in Astoria is calling on exactly this, voter ID. Dan, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Brian, guys, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. This is my question. I just remembered just recently voting in the NYC primary. I forget what office it was. I forget what I was voting for. It was a local primary here in Astoria. Went to your local middle school, just walk on in, save my name. They gave me the table that I should go and register with. I give them my name, and I think I signed something, maybe validating that, like assuring that it was me. But what is the argument that is usually given by voting rights advocates and as to why some kind of a photo identification shouldn't be required when you come in to vote.
Dan, thank you very much. And yeah, you had a lot to vote for in the New York primary in Astoria. There was a state Senate race, a state assembly race, the congressional race, the Claire Valdez DSA nominee won. We're actually going to be talking more about that in our next segment. But Liza from the ACLU, I'm going to turn that over to you because this does poll well nationally. Photo ID to go in and vote. Not something as simple as New York has, for example, that the caller cites, where you just have to sign your name and it has to just be close enough to the signature you originally registered with, maybe many years ago. Why not voter photo ID to the people who oppose it?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm glad the caller got out there and voted. I think that, the harms of these policies can be difficult to quantify, but they're really damaging. So these kinds of policies, we know from research and scholarship, are discriminatory. They make voting more difficult, and they're in many cases designed that way to deter and disenfranchise voters, especially from communities where folks are, less likely to have ready access to photo ID, for example. And so the risk, the harm is really great that, eligible voters will not be able to participate in our elections because they will not have access to voter ID, or they are, not willing to jump through the hoops to get it. And so it will drive turnout down and make our elections less reflective of the communities who are trying to make their voices heard.
Lawrence in Anchorage, Alaska, is calling in with a story from his state that might be instructive for New Jersey and nationally, but we have to take a break. We're going to do that right now. Lawrence, hang on. We're going to get to your call right after this and talk more. And listeners in New Jersey, you can chime in on this too. Should the state end motor voter, the automatic registration of so many people to vote when they come to register their cars or get IDs or driver's licenses at DMV, and also rolling back the ability for non-citizens to get driver's licenses? 212-433 WNYC, 212-433-9692, as the Brian Lehrer Show continues. Brian Lehrer on WNYC as we continue to discuss Governor Mikie Sherrill's announcement on Tuesday that a software issue at the Department of Motor Vehicles accidentally registered about 6,000 non-citizens to vote. About 400 of them actually did. She says there's no evidence of this glitch affecting the outcome of any election in the state, but Republicans now want to end or at least pause the state's motor voter automatic registration law that's supposed to weed out non-citizens, but didn't in these cases, and also roll back driver's license rights for non-citizens. I think even if they're here legally, we're talking about all of this with WNYC and Gothamist, New Jersey reporter Mike Hayes, who's been on the story, and Liza Weisberg, a supervising attorney at the ACLU of New Jersey, where she focuses on democracy and voting rights. And Lawrence in Anchorage, Alaska is calling in. Lawrence, you're on WNYC. Hello from New York.
Oh, thank you, Brian. I listen to you all the time, even though it's 4 hours behind here in Anchorage. And I wanted to put on the record, I am not a Trump supporter, even though I'm in a red state. We have about 750,000 people here in this state. And recently we purged about 3,000 people from the rolls because we've had some problems here. And that's like under 0.5% total. So given that, I've volunteered in the elections process for over a decade here in Anchorage, and I worked as a volunteer. I was looking at people's IDs when they came in. They were on the if they were on the register. I would look at who was there, and check them in to vote. Now, what had happened here was that in the process of registering to vote, which happens either at the DMV or in other places, we have what's called the PFD up here, which is the permanent fund dividend, which people get every year if they live in Anchorage over a number of years after 2 years. And so what happens in this process is that even people who are non-citizens can get a PFD, which is, I found very unusual. I was surprised by that. But in the process of doing that, a whole set of things gets triggered, and they can actually be put on the voter registration. And that happened here in Anchorage, in Whittier,
Alaska,
which is south of Anchorage.
Uh-huh.
And so people were actually prosecuted for that, for voting illegally. So we turned over, unlike other states, all of our voter registration rolls to the federal government, and that's what triggered this purge of people. But what wowed me, which I did not know when I was having my training, was that all we have to do is, if somebody says they're eligible to vote, they get put on the register. And then what happens is, if they have a driver's license, which they can, non-citizens, then they could technically vote. But that does not often happen.
Mm-hmm. What's the fix, in your opinion?
Well, it's difficult, because I think the fix would be that in order to be registered to vote, you would have to show proof of citizenship, which triggers all these other things. People have to show maybe a passport or a birth certificate, which some people don't have. So I think that's the only way to fix it, because technically the way it is now in our state is that people can be put on the register where I face them. They have a valid driver's license. I look at them, and they could technically vote. So,
Lawrence,
that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
thank you very much for that story. We really appreciate it. And thanks for listening at 6 o'clock in the morning, your time. We do have a podcast. You could listen later in the day, but then you couldn't call in, as you just did now, with a very informative comparison between what's happening in New Jersey or elsewhere and what happened in Alaska, as you describe it. So, Liza, let me turn that over to you, because this is the core part of the so-called Save America Act that Trump wants Congress to pass. It's exactly what the caller said from Anchorage at the end of his call. It's proof of citizenship to register to vote. Obviously, you're against that at the ACLU, but why not, considering what he described from Alaska and what was revealed this week in New Jersey?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think Governor Sherrill has been very clear that the fix is much simpler than that, right? This was a software glitch that resulted in these erroneous registrations, and it's a software glitch that can be and has been corrected. Now, more broadly, we know that documentary proof of citizenship requirements come at huge costs to all voters. As Lawrence mentioned, there are so many voters out there who don't have passports, who don't have easy access to their birth certificates. I don't know where my birth certificate is personally. It would be quite a challenge to unearth it. And so these measures make it harder for everyone to vote. And, I wish that the folks who talk about election integrity appreciated that these aggressive anti-voter laws make it harder for eligible U.S. citizens to cast ballots. And if the kind of documentary proof of citizenship requirements that are, central to proposed legislation like the Save America Act were to go into effect, we would see huge discriminatory effects. We would see enormous burdens on voters, especially younger voters, women, voters from communities of color, voters with disabilities, voters with limited English proficiency, and so on. And really across the board, we would see that voting would become harder, and we would have fewer individuals participating in the political process, which would make our elections, less fair, less representative.
John in Monmouth County, you're on WNYC. Hi, John.
Hey, Brian. Thank you. Long time, multi-time. Michael Saul Warren just mentioned Christine Hanlon. She's the chair of the GOP in New Jersey, but she's also the clerk of Monmouth County, New Jersey. And she had her own software issue a few years ago. I think it was 2023 in the town of Belmar. There was a mistake was made in the way they counted. I think everything besides what was voting on the machine, like all the mail-ins and all the write-ins and all this other. Anyway, they got counted twice. I think that was the issue, and she just chalked it up to a software issue from a vendor. So I really hope the GOP treads lightly if they're just going to really go after this seemingly legitimate software issue that happened at DMV. It's not good, but it's legit,
John, thank you very much. And our WNYC guest in this segment is Mike Hayes, not Michael Saul Warren, Mike Hayes, our other Michael who covers New Jersey. But are you familiar with that Belmar issue?
Yes, I am. Yeah, and great point by that caller that the head of the NJGOP is also working as a clerk, so she's in the trenches on this issue. Yeah, and the discussions around the software have been really, really interesting this week, Brian. Yeah, as Liza pointed out, Sherrill came out and said, this was a glitch and they fixed it back in 2024. But at the same time, she's firing this company, IDEMIA, who created this software, and they've been defiant about, hey, this wasn't our fault. You guys at the Board of Elections should have done a better job of policing your roles. So the fights over software are really interesting here, and yeah, I mean, this is not I think to our caller's point, although I take offense at him getting my name wrong there. just kidding. Yeah, to his point about Miss Hanlon's issues in Monmouth in Belmar, this is not specifically a Democrat problem. The governor said the other day on Tuesday, both Democrats and Republicans were mistakenly registered here. So it should be putting on my rose-colored glasses. Maybe the two parties come together with a solution here, going back to the legislation. I talked about what Republicans defiantly came out with yesterday, but there's also a bill to try to fix the motor voter registration issue that's bipartisan. That was actually introduced by Democrat Senator James Beach down here in South Jersey. That Senator Kristen Corrado, who's kind of leading the charge on this for the Republicans, is a co-sponsor on.
What would that do?
It's pretty straightforward. It would say if you click no, I'm not a citizen, you don't get the option to register to vote. It's
but isn't that what was supposed to happen in the first place? But the computer messed it up.
Yep, absolutely, and that's that's what they're trying to figure out. If I guess there's a way to do this on the software end as part of this investigation, but at the same time, they're trying to do this legislatively as well. But we should also note, Brian, they're not in session right now. The state legislature, haven't heard any murmurings or anything about calling them back before September. The Republicans have said they want a special legislative committee to with subpoena power to investigate, to call people in and hold hearings and get folks to testify about what happened here. But
to do something before the midterms. Is that
why? That's the posturing of the legislature right now. So we'll have to wait and see. Could be more could be more action today. Certainly will be more action next week on this from the lawmakers' end. And folks like me will be pressing the Sherrill administration pretty hard to see how fast these independent investigations can get done. Because like I said, we vote every year in New Jersey, and I know that it's not unique this year. Midterms is happening everywhere, but those elections are coming up fast and furiously here.
By the way, I guess we have two mics covering a Mikie. Somebody's got to change their name here. I don't know if it's going to be you. Change it to Phil or Christy Todd or something. I don't know.
Brian, I'm 42 years old. My whole family still calls me Mikie. So you're looking in the wrong direction for who's going to change their name here.
I love the part of your story on Gothamist, and you mentioned it, where some non-citizens who accidentally got registered asked to be removed from the voter rolls because they knew they were registered by mistake. These are the scrupulously honest people of the world, right? Who I think don't get enough press. Like if one undocumented immigrant or any immigrant commits a crime, it gets blown up in the news and it becomes a stand-in, in a very discriminatory way for all immigrants. What about when a group of immigrants who are non-citizens who get mistakenly registered to vote go up to whoever it is and say, please take me off the voter rolls. I don't deserve to be on. It deserves a little bit of a spotlight, right?
I think so. And just to nerd out with you a little bit on that point, Brian, it speaks directly to what the New Jersey GOP task force has been able to pull together from public records request. It seems fairly limited in terms of documents that they've gotten here, which I think speaks to the need for or why everyone, not just Republicans, Democrats as well, is calling for a really deep independent investigation here.
We're always for nerding out here. So, Liza, last question. I mean, it's always very rich and very ironic that President Trump, who was impeached in connection with leading the false election fraud claims movement after his loss in 2020, impeached by the House, not removed by the Senate, is now trying to claim he's the one trying to clean up the system when it looks to most people like he's just trying to make it harder for any Democratic constituencies to vote by claiming levels of fraud or election interference that they don't remotely have evidence of. I'm just curious, as we run out of time, to pull back, to a wider lens view to end, what kinds of attempts to break our electoral democracy you're most concerned about Trump trying to get away with for the midterms in November?
Well, I think it all stems back to that false narrative of voter fraud that has been roundly and repeatedly discredited. And so I'm concerned about the administration pushing legislation that relies on those false narratives that would make it harder for people to vote. It is not in the interests of election security or integrity to put major obstacles in the way of eligible voters. We have systems that work well to make voting fair, accessible for all. And so I hope that those kinds of systems prevail.
We leave it there with Liza Weisberg, supervising attorney at the ACLU of New Jersey, where she focuses on democracy and voting rights, and WNYC and Gothamist, New Jersey reporter Mike, his family still calls him Mikie, Hayes. Thank you both so much.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you so much.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.